So, good morning, good evening, good afternoon from everywhere you're joining us today or this evening or this morning. So, we are very happy today. We have a different setup after some 2 weeks of break. We are again back to talk about AI research and analytics and everything around it. And you remember last time we talked about statistical reporting. Today we proceed with it, but using a different perspective or a different angle to it. So with me we have the usual gentlemen, Amos and Stanley on the far right. Let's see how this conversation go. I know Stanley, you have some questions you'll be taking us through to guide this conversation. So probably we start with Amos, and then when you get to Stanley, it will just be introducing himself or what he has today, and we'll proceed with the questions. Thank you so much.
So for those who are wondering what I'm holding in my hands, this is my microphone. Yeah, I don't have a microphone if you can see. Yeah, so this is what I'm using at least to record my voice. Yeah, so welcome. I don't have much to say. I'm Amos Maranga. Let me just give it to Stanley.
Okay, thank you guys. It's been long. How many years now?
Weeks.
Okay. Since we met, but it's a pleasure we are here today to at least discuss something, of course, related to research, statistics, AI, and all those form of discussions. We have been away for some time. I know you're wondering where we went to, but we are back with a great energy like never before to try to help researchers and statisticians and people who are in this data analytics industry to at least gain something. So in our discussion, feel free to criticize us, feel free to suggest, feel free to add in your input whenever you are listening to our videos, because we do not have monopoly of ideas and knowledge, but we are trying just to discuss these things to make our life better than it is today. So today, our topic for today is we want to look at the interests, statistical reporting and research in this field of data analytics, just to understand how do people report whenever they do research, what are their interests, and all those kind of things to do with research. So today I'll try to just point a few questions to my colleagues and panelists here so that we try to unravel this issue of interests and statistical reporting. So maybe Elias say to the far right, I don't know what your right is. But yes, but to my far right, I'll start with Elias, maybe just to try to understand. Elias, do you think maybe interests in research affect the outcome of how we do our research in this field of data analytics?
Okay, thank you so much, Stanley, for that question. And before we proceed, I think it's a good time to say we have new team members on Study Research and Analytics. If you follow us on LinkedIn, you can see we've introduced them there. But yes, to come back to your question, any research has interests. And for those who are in project management or monitoring and evaluation, you talk about interest of stakeholders. So everything, every intervention that happens, there are always interests. Of course, now people tend to take interest negatively, but there are always interests to any kind of research that happens. So the research could be with the interest that you want to address some problem. Let's say you want to research on a prevalence of malaria in a city or in some remote area, so that you introduce appropriate interventions that will address that specific problem. You think about anything when someone wants to start a business, the interest is I want to maximize the profits that I can get from this specific investment. Therefore, let me do a research so that I can maximize returns. We call it market research, of course. Let me do that so that I can maximize my returns, sales, or profit margins. So yeah, I would say in affirmative, we have interest in research.
What do you think, Amos?
Oh,
How do interest affect the outcome?
over research.
Yes.
Yeah, that's something that is very fundamental. And first of all, I believe for viewers, you already know where we are with this discussion, because already we have already done a video regarding statistical reporting,
Yeah.
and we have touched on why we think it's an important thing for us to share this information. And this information that we're sharing here is important for the general public, not just for a specific elite of people, a group of people. Yeah, and the discussion came about because we realized that statistics is a weapon. Sometimes people use it for their own benefit, and one of the benefits that we can say is driven by interests. So when somebody is doing research, there's something that you really want to achieve with that particular research. So first of all, we appreciate the role of research in the world, in civilization, because research has contributed significantly to the growth of many industries, to the development of many products that we are using today. So it has been a very beneficial thing that has happened to humanity. But in every good thing that we face as humans, there are people who tend to use these good things that we have in life for malicious reasons. Yeah, and research is one of the things that people use for malicious reasons, and because of the interest that they do have. So apart from what Elias has mentioned, another good example that we can share of how people can use it with particular malicious interests, we can talk about things like, let's say, like influencing public opinion. So if you want to influence public opinion, and you want to use an approach that people may tend to believe in, you just use research.
Yeah.
Yeah, because once somebody shares information and say that it's from a study that was conducted, people start listening. Oh, okay, if it's a study which was conducted, then whatever you're sharing must be true.
Yeah.
So if for instance I want to influence a particular idea, and say like let me just give a lame example, like in the Kenyan context, and say using bicycles is recommended by most Nairobians. If maybe I want to open a bicycle industry, and I want to influence that opinion, and that bicycle is one of the most useful means of transport, or is one of the most preferred means of transport. So when I do start a study, when I do like delegate a study to be done, I would want my researchers to portray an image that there's a huge need of bicycles in the city. And if this study is shared, people will start believing that whatever I'm saying is a truth in the ground, because there's a study which backs this information. And that way I can increase the sales of my business, which is selling bicycles. So people tend to do this to influence, to because they have a particular interest, and they want to influence particular,
to pursue those interests.
Exactly. So it happens also in politics. So that's another area that is very, very sensitive, because if people want to really influence maybe the public perception about maybe a particular individual, let's say if it comes to an election, we see, this is a common thing. We see that even the news companies, you can see a particular news company telling you that candidate A is leading by 50%, and if you watch a different media outlet, it will tell you that but candidate B is leading. So if these studies were done scientifically, the results are supposed to agree. Then why is it that these results are differing? And in some cases, they differ significantly. So if they differ with that small margin, we can just allow the room of error. But in most cases, the margins are very huge. This is because of the interests that these media houses usually carry.
I agree with what Elias and Amos have just said, because even not in research, in life, people have interests. So it applies everywhere, but how you meet that interest is what matters.
Yeah.
It is not always a must you achieve the interest you want, but
Yeah.
doing something ethically with the right procedure or criteria is the best means. What you have said brings me to the question of, I know most people, if not all, must have hypotheses when they want to develop this research, and they will definitely work towards the hypothesis they are having. So my question is, do you think people manipulate data, especially in this research field, so that it complies with their hypothesis, or so that it can suit their hypothesis? Maybe you can start with you.
Yeah, I like the idea that you've raised that question, because that's what I really wanted to contribute to again. Yeah, so that question that you have asked is tied to the first question of interest.
Yeah.
Because, and it is good that you mentioned that one, because now we're talking about something like academia.
Yeah.
People in academia, because it really happens a lot. When, if you're a student who is pursuing a master's degree or a PhD, you might be interested in a particular phenomenon, in a particular society, in nature, or in a particular company or something like that one. You might be interested in a particular phenomenon. We can look, we have so many examples, but when you're starting the process, you might be having your own ideas of what you expect to see on the ground. For instance, you might be having an idea that, let's say like men are very good at business. I'm just giving an idea. This is not a fact. You might be having an idea that men are very good at business compared to women. So you might formulate an hypothesis which tends to favor the idea that men are good at business compared to women. But when you go to the ground and then collect data, then the data tells you different. Data says, no, I think the idea you had is not true, because it seems women are very good at business compared to men. So because you had the notion that it's supposed to be the other way, you want it to be the way you thought. So you might try all means necessary to ensure that the results tally with what you believed initially. And that's a very huge mistake.
With your hypothesis.
With your hypothesis. So that hypothesis is just a guiding statement. It is not supposed to be always the correct statement. So whenever you do research, if the results do not tally with what your preconceived ideas, it's a good research practice to agree with what the data is telling you. As long as you have adhered to all the standard practices, the best practices in research, the data speaks to you.
The data should speak.
It should speak to you. Exactly.
Without you forcing.
Without you forcing anything. That is a practice that needs to be adopted by students when they're doing their studies.
What do you think, Elias?
I think I stated and I've always said that people use numbers never lie, but people use numbers to lie. So first of all, what is a hypothesis? It's basically an assumption that you're making before you go to carry out your research. So I was trying to say, you might have this assumption that men are good in business because you've seen your friends and people around you who do business tend to be men.
Or in your side, in your circle, you have.
So you have that assumption that men are good in business. Let's do research to determine if this is the case, or it's basically my subjective view of the world. Now, when you go to do the research, you realize maybe it's 50-50, or even in some situations, women are good in business. Now, you, because you have earlier assumptions, or you're predisposed to believe that men are good in business, you want to force that. So that is now using numbers to lie. This happens a lot in our daily lives, and we don't realize it happens subconsciously. Let's say in your business, I must just use an example of students, but now in your business, let's say there's some budget that has been allocated to the marketing and sales department, and then you want to say an increase in budget has a positive impact to sales. And then you have that assumption. You go to the field, you realize, yes, with an increase in budget to the marketing department, there is no effect on the sales. That I'm not saying that's the situation, but it could happen in some other scenarios. And then because you want to justify why that budget should be retained in the department, now it brings in the issue of interest.
Yes.
So we want to retain this budget of ours. Let's say an increase in budget has a positive correlation, a strong positive correlation with sales and profit margins to the company. When maybe there are other factors, let's say we've talked about confounding factors before. Let's say we've had some good people who've been recruited on the team under the sales department, or there's been some changes in brand awareness, or something has happened that is affecting an economic phenomenon has happened. Let's say people in the economy have had salary increases, and then people are buying more,
and the demand is
high, and then you use your numbers to lie that it is our efforts in the marketing department, when in fact there are some other factors. Probably a data scientist or a data analyst can help to unravel. So we tend to have our own subjective perceptions about specific phenomenon, and when we allow that to affect our assumptions, or rather the hypothesis that we've come up with, we force it to behave in some way, then you ask yourself, was that research even necessary? If you are just confirming your own assumptions against what the data is saying, there was no need for that research in the first place. So that will be my contribution to the subject of hypothesis and how it appears to be under the interest.
Okay, so the issue of now setting the hypothesis in the research, I know, because you can either reject hypothesis or fail to reject. That's one thing people should know. So that then means it's not a must you achieve the hypothesis you set. This now brings us to the next question, where do you think when we are sourcing our data, because we already have interest, we make this data even more biased? For example, let me just say, maybe company X is dealing with product ABC, and then they are selling those products, but they want to use their data to conduct some analysis using that data, but already that data is pointing to something. Whereas maybe in the field, when people are looking at those products, they might be buying that product but from a different company. But for them, they are looking at product A, B, and C. Which one is selling more? Instead of getting this data random from the field to understand what do people say about a certain product. So do you think where we source our data also has an impact on our interest and now how we on our assumptions? So maybe Elias.
That's a good question, and it's very true. We emphasize the source of data because if you don't have a reliable source, then your research or your analysis is as good as dead before it even starts. So they say it's dead on arrival. So the source of data, if you want to research on there was a good example you used, for instance, the number of children adolescents who have ever taken alcohol. And then you go in a rehabilitation center. You go in a rehabilitation center to take your sample of the people to interview. You are 100% or even above 90% likely that you will be interviewing the people who've come out of alcoholism. So the source of data, if to some extent it's taking that angle, then it ends up being biased. So there are so many scenarios. If you don't have an objective perspective or an objective way to approach the data collection or the source of data itself, it already creates problems, and this can only reinforce your false hypothesis even before you do a comprehensive analysis, and then you might just go and make your conclusions that are based on false or inadequate or inappropriate data. And this is happening so much. I mean, we decided to talk about statistical reporting because we've been reading and we see articles that just talk about things. And these articles have been published by reliable platforms.
Yeah.
Whether scientific or in the news channels. If someone just comes and says, Kenyans support candidate A for the Minister of Education, we look at the company which did the research, it has no clear standing in the society.
I remember people are saying, which Kenyans?
Which Kenyans? So we go further to delve into it.
Yeah.
And this is not only here, it's happening all over the world.
That's true.
You look at the Americas, currently they're having their presidential elections. There are so many polls happening around. And if you look at, for instance, the American, USA to be specific, the context of their elections is media houses clearly declare whom they're supporting. Or sometimes they don't declare, but we can see when they're reporting, there's a way they will adopt their reporting for candidate A Democrat and a Republican. So now, if you use New York Times as an example to get data or insights about a Democrat, you've already started to lose it. If you go to Fox News and you want to see how a Republican is performing, without balancing the two, then everything else will be misleading to you. Probably it can influence the people who are undecided in those sort of polls and electoral process. But what you're saying here is the source of data itself is biased. Yeah. So I said so many things, but at least I'm trying to bring the point home.
Yeah.
Yes. I get your point, because what you're trying to touch on is that there's fundamentality in the source of data. And because garbage in, of course, garbage out.
And this is so much connected to what we talked about statistical reporting last time, because after that I came across some article. It was talking about why men's testosterone is going down nowadays. And among the many recommendations they are providing, they're saying nowadays men don't smoke so much as in the past. So you see, someone is taking a very valid subject of discussion and they're fitting into it their own interests. Probably some tobacco company somewhere want to promote their products, and they're saying, you guys, you need to smoke so that you increase your testosterone. Now, and you see they are basing that on some scientific process which was done. So it is to some extent or to a larger extent misleading. And the fact that people tend to rely on statistical information and those scientific platforms for information, and even AI itself uses those kind of insights for learning and training and coming up with models, it's creating a whole societal problem. So that's why we have to talk about it.
That's true.
Interest, statistical reporting, sourcing data, reporting, and all those things.
Yeah. So speak to the source of data.
Yeah, source of data.
Yeah.
Very critical subject. Yeah. I like what Elias has said, and the way he has connected all that to AI. Yeah, but before I go into that, first of all, I would like to let you know, all of us, like even our audience, I would like to let you know, most of the studies, they are just BS. Most of them are BS.
Yeah.
So, not all of them There are very good studies.
There are people who are doing very good work.
There are people who are doing very good studies, very good, very diligent, very ethical.
Yeah.
They abide by they adhere with all the best practices in conducting a scientific research, and they produce valuable insights. But majority of what we have out there is pure BS. So one thing that you need to know: do not be constantly believing everything that you see in all these research journals. First of all, you have to interrogate these research journals to be sure how did these people arrive at these conclusions. And that's why now there's this point of the source of data.
Data source, yeah.
Yeah. Source of data is very critical because data is the one which generates the results that are shared in these studies.
Yeah.
So how we obtain this data will determine the type of results we're going to have at the end. In a scientific process, we have to ensure that the way we select our data, or we select our sample, the sample from which you're going to collect our data, we have to do it in a fashion that is very scientific, which means it has to be a randomized sampling.
Yeah.
And we have to ensure that everybody who is in the target population has equal chance to be selected.
Yeah.
To ensure that we cater for all the variability that is present inside our sample. So then if we do the wrong sampling, we introduce what we call the selection bias.
Yeah.
And the selection bias is now confounding to the sampling bias, which we already have because we're doing the sample.
Yeah.
So you see, if you do it wrong, you're making one mistake after the other.
Yes.
So why do we say it's important to understand how the data was sampled? So let us take an example, another good example about, let's say, something like academics. So there might be a notion out there that maybe boys are performing better in KCSE compared to girls. Yeah. So if you go and take, let's say, like KCSE results, you might find it that, okay, I see top 10 students, 7 of them were boys, and 3 of them were girls. So definitely boys perform better than girls. And then you conclude, and you make a conclusion, because that's how most people do it. But is that really true? Have you done your sampling correctly? First of all, there are many factors that contribute to someone's performance.
Yes.
Not just gender.
Yes.
We have so many other variables that you can call confounding variables in this case that do influence the performance of a student.
Yes.
Number one, the income of your family. If you're coming from a very poor background, you might lack access to very many reading materials.
Yeah.
You might go to not so good schools. Yeah. So which means you have access to let's say like average to mediocre teaching.
Yes.
So in such a case, how do we expect much from you when you don't receive much? Yeah. That's a factor that can influence someone's performance.
Sure.
Then we have the type of school. Yeah. We have private, like for instance, like if I give an example in the Kenyan context, private schools tend to be more diligent in teaching compared to public schools, where you just have to, as a student, you're supposed to put in more effort to make sure that you perform well. So that's a factor that influences performance. Yeah. So we have so many other reasons. We can talk about, let's say, like the geographical location. People who are living in arid areas, they might be like you're living in so much hardship. You don't even see hope in your studies. So these are things that can influence someone's performance.
True.
So you cannot just go and take the final results and say, okay, you see, okay, most men go to A's than ladies. Then men are better than ladies. No. Go and look at these other variables and try to standardize these other variables. And from there, you can now make a sound conclusion and say, okay, if you, after taking in the effect of income, the effect of type of school, the effect of location, the effect of, let's say, like the number of hours we are being taught, the type of curriculum, the type of textbooks that are being used. If you look at the effect of, after taking consideration of all those effects, what do we get as the final result? So this sampling, this source of data is very critical to what you're going to get at the end
outcome,
here.
yeah.
At the end here. So in any case, if you come across a study and you see that they've presented their findings, go to the methodology section, go and look there, and inquire how they got their data. So that way, if you see that they took a very scientific approach to obtaining the data, then you might be coming closer now to believing what they're saying. Otherwise, if they don't abide to those strict scientific protocols, don't believe in those results. They're just let's say like findings which can be explored more, but not facts.
Yeah, true. I agree with you totally. I'm happy you have talked to the issue of sampling and some techniques of sampling. I know there are various techniques of sampling, but I don't know. I believe so much in simple random sampling because to me it seems to be the best sampling techniques. It gives everyone a chance to be selected. Now this brings us to the question of now reporting. You have interest, you have your data, you have collected data out of your interest somehow, and now you want to report. Do you think, because people just report maybe 95% confidence, or we are testing at 0.05 level of significance, do you think people with your experience and expertism and through reading these articles, do you think people understand when they talk about this statistical reporting, how they report the information after they have obtained it and after they have done the analysis? Maybe to begin with, Elias, do you think people understand when it comes to reporting, what they are reporting and how they are reporting?
Thanks so much. That is quite a good progress in this conversation. But it's a very limited number of people understand these concepts, because they're statistical anyway. This is why in any department, in any organization, you need someone to interpret these things for you. And probably someone with expertise, whether mathematics, statistics, computer science, or whichever. So this is something that is not understood by everybody. And the challenge becomes when blanks or just umbrella statements are thrown out there. For instance, when someone said Kenyans support Biden's bid for presidency, and we were asking which Kenyans. So in such kind of reporting, we would say it would be appropriate for the reporter or the journalist to say just the title itself, 80% of Kenyans supports Biden's bid for presidency, and then we can dig into it and say how was this done. Like we've mentioned about the methodology, some people are just using a single case study to come up with a whole general statement about everybody else. So the fact is, people don't understand what 95% confidence means, what 5% confidence level means, which room is there for errors, because those are, even some statisticians don't understand room for error, what it means. Now, if you don't understand, you're relying on someone who is reporting it to report in can I say in an appropriate way or in an ethical way that will not be misleading. We talked about marijuana last time, that cancer and marijuana, there is a connection in terms of treatment, but it's just the way it's reported. It's very misleading. So everything you read is not the truth. It's not the biblical truth. It's just some people trying to sell something. And they take advantage of the fact that people don't understand those technical terms. When someone who has done something in sociology, or not despising those people who have done sociology or theology, let me use theology. If someone has done theology and you're telling them, I am 95% confident that that adolescents engage in premarital sex, what are you even saying to them? To them, they would like that to be communicated differently. So people take advantage of whichever technical things exist to pass general information around to sell something. And it's just unethical all through.
I do agree with you, and I concur, because in reporting, because when you are reporting, you are doing statistical reporting, you are assuming that this person who is on the ground does not know anything, and you need to communicate to them the information so that they can conceptualize what was being said.
And to my assumption, or not necessarily to my assumption, but it's always my personal opinion that a data analyst, a data scientist, or an expert in data should be, or any other expert. You don't look cool when you communicate technical things to people. Expertise should imply taking technical and complex things, you communicate them in a very simple way.
In a
layman's way, but still make sense to those people who don't understand. Because not everybody understands everything else. I don't understand things to do with engineering. So I would expect that my brother is an electrical engineer. I would expect when I'm working with him on some project to do with connection and power lines and all those things, he'll not come and tell me this is 3-phase and 3-phase. I don't understand what 3-phase and 2-phase is. I only know my face. Now let's make it simple. What do you mean by I need a 3-phase kind of system in my house? Now, assuming you're describing that to that 80-year-old mama who is trying to connect power in her house, will 3-phase make sense, or is just a way to steal money from her?
To make them scared.
Yeah, so of course you make them scared and they pay you more.
To look smart.
And to look smart. Sometimes when you're the worst idiot in that field.
Amos, do you think people really understand when it comes to this reporting, how they are supposed to report and what they are reporting at some times? Do they understand?
I think one of the things that has been weaponized by these people who have malicious reasons to when they're conducting studies is how they report their studies. Because it's a very powerful way of misleading people. Because first of all, your data shows that what you're saying might be an indication of what data is saying, but the problem is the people who are receiving the information cannot comprehend what you're saying. So they just take whatever you're saying at face value. And one thing that I've come to see that works very well for this type of, when it comes to the reporting of statistics, is the use of numbers. And you've said something. People try to put this language in a layman's, to put it to narrow it to a layman's level. But in some cases, okay, that's my opinion. I find it that they are making it. They're trying to use a layman language,
but they make it even worse.
But they're damaging the emotion completely. And an example we can have is that let's say like if a study has been done in a place like Kisumu, and then they tell you that they collected data, they sampled, let's say, like 3,000 individuals, and they collected their data about HIV status. And then from their sample, they get like 5%, or let me just give a better figure, something like 10%. This is just an example. Let me just give 20. 20 is much better for me. 20% are HIV positive. It's an example. I don't mean that it's a fact in the ground. So once they do that, so because maybe they see like if I say 20%, people might not understand this, what I'm trying to say. So they'll narrow it to a layman's language and say 2 out of 10 people are HIV positive. So what do you think the layman understands? The layman understands this way.
In a group
if he goes to Kisumu, for every 10 people he or she meets, 2 have are HIV positive. Which is very, very misleading. That's not a fact. That's not how it is at the ground. So this language has just been narrowed down to try to make sense to the layman. But at the same time, it has damaged the information completely.
Yes.
But I think in the NGO world, they also try to use that to show impact, or not necessarily NGO, but the not-for-profit sector.
Yeah.
They try to say, for instance, 1,000 in every 100,000 don't have access to water.
Yeah.
And then it looks like, damn, these people are dying.
These are so many.
There are so many.
Yeah.
5 in every 10 people in some county somewhere don't have access to water.
Yeah.
And then it looks like it's such a big problem.
Yeah, it's good to
when
be.
sometimes it's actually a problem manufactured locally. These are things we can talk about some other time.
But now you see, by reporting that way, there's an idea that now comes into someone's mind. Okay, if you're talking about prevalence of 20%, that's a very high prevalence. No doubt about that. But now, how people interpret it is sometimes very, very confusing. So what people need to know is, when they're saying 20% are HIV positive, it means 20% in the entire population. Yeah. So it's possible for you to meet 10 random people who do not have HIV completely. And it's possible for you to meet in that population 10 people who all of them have HIV. So that usually is not even clear to most of this, to most of people who do not understand these jargons. And it's very easy for them to be misled. And you can also look at the information that was shared by our former president when he said 2 billion is stolen every day.
Yeah.
So we felt like every morning,
every day
we're starting at 2 billion is going away.
Yeah, but the day ends, 2 billion is going. No, it doesn't mean that 2 billion is going every day. It means that if you take 2 billion cumulatively
over some period of time.
So in simple terms, if such information comes to you, it means that, okay, how many days do we have in a year? We have 365 days in a year. So take that 2 billion that is saying is being stolen in a day, multiply it by this one. So what it should speak to you is that it's saying every year we lose more than 700 billion shillings to corruption.
And then
so it means there's a day when we can lose more than other days.
Yes.
But it's not like a rate
every
day we're losing 2 billion. No.
And I almost interjected. This is why reporting on average is always a big problem. Because it's affected by those extreme circumstances.
Exactly.
Let's say in the COVID, as an example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, when so much was stolen because so much was readily available. Now you compare to the time when we don't have cash, the government, and there is just no cash, no projects running around. And in that case, there is no money to steal. Now you combine these two moments when there was a time maybe even 4 billion was going in a day. And then there's a time when 0 is going in a day. And then you come up with an average. So it's really affected by those outliers.
That's true.
Data scientists and data analysts can understand this better. But it's just to be conscious that when you're saying 2 in every 10, it does not mean count every 2, take away. Count every 10,
take away 2.
2 are positive.
You must be something. Count every the next 10. That's not the case. It could be among those 10, no one has. Even among the first 20, there's no one.
No, exactly.
Then maybe the last 10 have all of them. So it's good to understand these things.
Very great. You brought out very good examples, and actually I see this is consistent, especially in media industry. They keep on saying now 2 out of 10 do this, 2 out of, but they fail to understand that that kind of reporting can be misleading, because if you are saying maybe in a group of 10 people, 3 out of these people are thieves, or 7 out of this, people will be cautious even when they are dealing with in a certain group. They are like out of these, someone here must be.
So imagine your family of 10.
Yes. Yes, in a family of 10, 3 of you are thieves, and people become very suspicious, and it makes people lose confidence in others, and it's a very barbaric way of reporting to me.
Actually, now if we circle back now to the interest part of it, it works for companies, and I see companies like these ones who are making beauty soaps and also toothpaste. You can see they're saying that 99% of the doctors recommend this. Now, which doctors?
Where did you carry that survey?
Which doctors did you sample?
Did you get this data from? Yeah. So they use that figure
to mislead you, so that they benefit. They want to meet their interest.
Exactly.
So
my economics teacher told me that is nudge. It's a technique for sales. So you throw around such kind of a statements, you're sure you'll convince so many people to buy. So it's used to increase sales, which is good for growth of the businesses. So it only starts to become a problem when you're promoting something that can affect the society. I mean, you're promoting.
Assume the product has some
side effects
on the society. So it means people will tend towards buying that, consuming that product more. But in the long run,
the effects. So you're not telling people what the doctor has advised against your product. For instance, your product has the potential. It's carcinogenic. Maybe it has carcinogenic components. So you're just focusing on the positive, and you're not declaring the negative side of it. So if you're promoting something really good, we are saying it could be something really nice to employ. But now if you are really promoting something that will end up affecting the community, you just have your personal interest in something that are not to the fulfillment of the whole society or satisfaction of the whole society, then that is dangerous, unethical, against the principles.